Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another retro adventure. The end of another week, the end of another poll. We've got a very good win for One Stage Before for Shadowrun. Now as usual, I'll cover that in the desktop in a wee second, and I'll be back at the end of the video with some other channel related news and some other poll related news. Before I do that, I'd like to take a moment to talk about our Patreons, who this week I have been informed never make a deal with the dragon, which makes them very wise indeed. And these guys help support the channel and make all of this possible. So their efforts are very much appreciated. Now, if you'd like to join them and help support the channel, and I sure wish you would, or you'd like to gain access to these videos a week early, or you'd like to gain access to one of the other levels of patronage we've got, such as getting access to some of my writings, then the Patreon's in the description down below. If you check it out, it'd be very much appreciated. But anyway, let's have a look at One Stage Before. So, this is One Stage Before, which is for Shadowrun. Came out from FASA in 1992. Now that release date puts it squarely as Second Edition was just coming out. But FASA didn't want to limit its audience to people who had already bought Second Edition. So it is designed for both systems. It's for First and Second Edition Shadowrun. At this period, they dropped the Adventure for Shadowrun logo off the cover, just sticking to the same design as all the source books. But online, I have seen this reviewed as the worst Shadowrun adventure, which shocked the hell out of me, because this is by Nigel D. Findlay, who viewers of the channel will know I admire as one of the best Shadowrun authors. He did fantastic adventures, he did absolutely brilliant novels. Some of the best Shadowrun novels were by him. He did loads of stuff for other role-playing games, did some Star Wars stuff, did Dungeons & Dragons stuff, before he was sadly taken from us just a couple of years after this was published. Way too young. At the absolute peak of his powers. He was a brilliant author and is very sadly missed, because I would have loved to have seen so much more by him. But I was shocked, because, as I said, this is an author I really respect, but why would this be a bad adventure? Now, we'll delve into that as we look through, but I don't agree, because I have great memories of playing this. I remember playing it. This was the first Second Edition adventure my group played. We'd just created new characters into Second Edition Shadowrun, and this was the adventure we played, and it was incredibly deadly. It changed the tone of Shadowrun for us, whereas we'd been heroes who were a bit bullet sponge-like, taking massive amounts of damage, surviving it, hurtling out massive amounts of damage, killing dragons regularly. This made us fragile and weak, and totally changed the way we played the game. Not to its detriment, we still really enjoyed Shadowrun, but it made us think about it twice before charging in all guns blazing. Now, let's have a look at the back cover. So, One Stage Before, one false step and the fat lady sings. When Mr. Johnson hires Shadowrunners to discover the brains behind repeated attempts to sabotage a major corporation's latest acquisition, their first wrong move could be their last. One Stage Before is an adventure for Shadowrun. It is compatible with the original Shadowrun rules and the newly revised Shadowrun Second Edition rules. And it's got the Shadowrun Second Edition logo there, the silver one, as well as the traditional red one on the cover. Inside, well, all the artwork is up to FASA's standard, which was absolutely lovely. It's all custom done, because obviously Orcs and Trolls in Cyberpunk isn't standard artwork that you would buy in. It's laid out very well, very easy to read, no fancy backgrounds. We hadn't entered that bad era of publishing. And we start off with a short story, just a couple of columns, one page of the background situation. And we get the introduction, games mastering notes, how to use the book, because this might be the first adventure that people just joining Shadowrun in Second Edition would play. So there's introduction to how the sections work, debugging, picking up the pieces at the end of the adventure, etc. We've got the preparation for the adventure, and then a plot synopsis detailing through. Now, the setup of this is the players are brought in because the corporation who has a mega successful band listed is suddenly taking off. This band is selling out stadiums, making an absolute fortune, but they're signed to a relatively small label. So larger corporations are looking at this, but the owner of the company, a dwarf, doesn't want to sell out. One of the other directors of the company approaches the players because the owner has had death threats to try and cause the company to sell out. The players start looking into these death threats to try and stop this corporation being taken over, and suddenly the owner is killed and the players are framed for it. Because this other director, Mr. Johnson, actually Jonathan Teague, is trying to take over the corporation to sell it out and make a massive profit. He knows that bands tend to be flash in the pan and he wants to make all the money he can. So the players go from being hired bodyguards, basically, to being on the run and wanted for a murder. And they have to clear their names. That's the setup of the adventure, basically. They will be approached by the dead man's secretary, who has background information about it. They'll be contacted by a former rock star who's become a vampire, who will give them more information. And they will be able to build the case against Teague until they can reveal his interference with the corporations he works for, and the corporation will take action against him. Not that that will reward the players particularly, but they'll get to live. So we've got the standard meet Mr. Johnson. As they meet the guy that's hiring them, gives them background information. He's driving a Rolls-Royce Phaeton around. He has a couple of bodyguards with him. You walk around the park, there's information, and then you carry on. You investigate various elements of it until eventually you get to meet up with the director of the company, the dwarf, and when you leave him, you are attacked by the police, because as you are leaving, it's phoned in that he's been murdered and that the players are the last people to have seen him. So you're armed Shadowrunners, considered armed and dangerous, and you're up against the cops. You go on the run. There's various background information on that. Meeting different people. As you contact your Mr. Johnston, he'll set up an ambush to take you out, because obviously you have background information, and you won't spoil his scheme if you're dead. Continuing through, you probably know the word the seat says you killed Allenby. I know he's alive when you left his office, says the secretary, and she reveals background information. Who last saw him, what happened, various information, because he was actually killed by a rogue SimSense. The players went in to meet him, he went to review some music afterwards, and the other director had spiked a SimSense of a band he was going to look at, which burnt out his brain and killed him. But she knows that when she went in, those recordings were all deleted. So that's her suspicion. So the players know that they're going to be looking for data on SimSense. And there's a party they can attend where they get background information. The Night Stalkers are a gang being run by a vampire who used to work for that label, Jet Black. The angst-ridden megastar reputed to have died. He has become a vampire. You've got access to the Matrix, and as you hack into Allenby's computer system and you find background information, the SimSense recordings. When you confront the cops, because there's been an FBI agent tailing you. Yet more accessing the Matrix to get access to more information on how the SimSenses were created. The vampire will send aid because he still feels that Allenby had helped him early on. So revenging his death is something the vampire's interested in. You got a final assault on the bad guy's home. There's physical security, magical security there. And Teague's house itself. And then we've got picking up the pieces. What happens if they're successful? What happens with Jet Black and the band? Who ends up signing them? What happens later on? What happens if you fail? And then the Karma Awards. We've got all the legwork. So the research that you do when you're going out. Searching for background information on the corporation when you're going to get hired. High Star Incorporated. On Allenby, on Teague, the other director, the band, the Shadows, on Jet Black, on Wallace and the FBI, the gang, and hardcore security. And we've got the various NPCs. So we've got Jonathan Teague, who's behind everything. Lou Allenby, the dwarf who gets murdered. Wallace, FBI agent. Meta, Teague's personal expediter. So the person who's basically arranging for everything bad to happen to the players. Jet Black, the vampire ex-pop star. We've got the members of the Shadows band. And then we've got a couple of newspaper handouts. If the players are successful, if they're unsuccessful, the background information. And condition monitors so you can track things down in combat. Now, I don't see what's so wrong with this adventure. As I said, when we played it, we had a lot of fun. We found it a lot more deadly. But the situations we wandered into were definitely interesting. You know, tracking down musicians at different bars, raiding a mega corporation director's or a large corporation director's home. It was fun, even though the system was a lot more deadly, but I don't blame the deadliness of the system on the adventure. It's not a particularly dangerous adventure. There's some combat in there, but it's not too bad at all compared to most second edition combat. The only thing I can draw is it's a bit derivative. It's yet another Shadowrun adventure involving bands. We've had Mercurial, we've had, I think Dark Angel was another one. We've had several adventures where the players are involved with rock stars. Now that's a very cyberpunk thing, but Shadowrun itself has evolved into something very different. And this feels like its early days when it's just trying to be cyberpunk but with orcs, trolls, dwarves and elves. It doesn't feel particularly Shadowrun-ish. But that doesn't fault it. It's still a very solid adventure and, as I've said a couple of times, one I had a whole load of fun playing. So that was one stage before, and that won the poll this week with some 35% of the vote. A dominating lead, and very much deserved, because Nigel D. Findlay, one of my favourite writers. Behind it, at second place on 27%, was The Perfect Warrior for the Street Fighter role-playing game. Tied on 18%, so in third place, was K for Dawn for 2300 AD, and Operation Rapid Strike for Top Secret. And way back behind on only 2% of the vote was Vizier Rocks for Living Steel, which is kind of sad because I do adore the Living Steel setting. I've raved about it in the past, and it'd be great to cover the adventure. But alas, not this time. Now, as usual, they're all cleared out of the poll, and we've got a fresh batch. And we're going back to a retro RPG. So first of all, we've got the Field Report Extrasolar Colonies for Aeon Trinity, from White Wolf in 1998. Now these were very slim books. The way that White Wolf was supporting Aeon Trinity was instead of bringing out big, thick, expensive books, they'd bring out pamphlets which were sold for magazine prices, so they could provide a lot more background information and you could get a lot more for your money. It was a great idea, and these booklets were really, really interesting. So let's see if that gets in there. Next up, we've got the US Army Vehicle Guide for Twilight 2000, which came out from Games Designers Workshop in 1986. Now, the Twilight 2000 books built up armies and forces, giving you so much information about the militaries which were involved in the Twilight War. So much to look at in these books. Really nicely illustrated, loads of stats, great stuff. After that, we've got the Alternity Campaign Kit for Alternity from TSR in 1998. Now, this is a bit of a sly one on my behalf because there's not a lot to cover in here. Basically, it's a Games Master screen and some character sheets. But it'd be interesting to look through at what they considered essential, especially as some people didn't like the way you basically had to break the back of the book to get copies of the character sheet. So they gave you bundles of character sheets in this kit. After that, we've got Galaxy Guide 2, Yavin and Bespin for the Star Wars role-playing game from West End Games in 1995. Now this is the second edition one I'll be covering, not the first edition. I think I do have the first edition one, but it was what I laid my hands on, because all of these are fresh out of my collection. You'll notice that none of these have been in the poll before. I just wanted to show that I've still got lots to cover. Now, Star Wars, obviously one of my favourite games. I've got a massive amount of books here. The Galaxy Guides are really interesting, but I didn't consider them totally essential. So it'll be interesting to see whether you want to know more about it. And finally, we've got Dimension Book 4 Scrapers for Rifts. Now, Rifts obviously has the Rifts Earth where different things come through, and you've got the world books detailing bits of the world. But you can go through the rifts to other dimensions, and they had the dimension books. And this is a kind of alien superhero type one, which was really quite interesting. Came out from Palladium in 1997 and felt very 90s to me. Like much of Rifts does, but this, focusing on sort of superheroics, felt way more 90s. But anyway, let's see which of those wins. Another channel-related stuff. Well, over on DrivethruRPG, I've released a couple of modern horror adventures. One of these is fairly adult-themed, involving child abuse, murder, prostitution, drugs. It's a very dark adventure, so really only consider looking at it if you don't mind those subjects. It's really looking into the darker side of life and the horror. The other one is based on Prince of Darkness. I've called it Prince of Lies, and it's taking the same premise but twisting it in a slightly different direction, where the players get to interact more with the creature of evil to decide what to do with it. I've also started releasing a bunch of books of character classes for post-Holocaust settings. I decided that I thought it was quite interesting that you could take Dungeons & Dragons and put it in different settings. I've been doing the modern horror ones recently. But post-apocalyptic setting, where you have the modern world a la Shadowrun with orcs, trolls, elves, etc. But a post-apocalyptic one where the world has fallen and you've got them surviving after the bomb. I think that's quite an interesting idea, so I'm going to explore that a bit. And I think I'm also going to go into sort of Victorian themes. You know, lots of orcs in top hats and things like that. But we'll see as I go along. I've just got a bunch of ideas in there how to take Dungeons & Dragons and fit it into different settings other than just pure fantasy. And we'll see if people are interested in those. Obviously, as well as selling them on DrivethruRPG, I've got them on the shared Google Drive for patrons of Laird and Librarian status. So if they're interested in seeing these, they just need to go on the shared Google Drive and they've got access to everything I've released on DrivethruRPG, which is now some 300 books over the past year or so. Some of them only a few pages long, some of them longer adventures where they're going up to many pages. Over on RPG Gamer, well, still working my way through the Young Jedi Adventures, the last batch which came out. I'm doing the last episodes of those and statting them out, and every week the new episodes of Bad Batch I'm covering as well, which has been absolutely fabulous. I'm going to be looking forward to, when the series ends, statting those out, but that's not going to be until May. But anyway, as usual, I think I've been wittering on for quite long enough, so thank you very much for watching. As always, most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.